Dr. Phil saw something in her face that made him turn to the camera and say 4 words that froze everyone in the studio. "Stop the tape. Now." The woman's hands were trembling. The man across from her had gone pale. The audience held their breath. What happened in the next 17 minutes would become one of the most powerful moments in daytime television history. But to understand why Dr. Phil broke protocol that day, we need to go back to how this confrontation began. Her name was Margaret Hayes. 57 years old, salt and pepper hair pulled back in a simple bun, wearing a navy cardigan that looked like it had seen better days. She sat in the green room before the show, clutching a faded photograph so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The photograph showed a young woman, barely 27, holding a newborn baby. Her smile was radiant, but her eyes told a different story. Next to her stood a man with his arm around her shoulder. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking away, towards something the lens couldn't capture. "Mrs. Hayes?" A producer knocked gently. "We're ready for you." Margaret nodded but didn't move. She'd waited 3 decades for this moment. Another 60 seconds wouldn't matter. On stage, Dr. Phil was reviewing his notes one final time. The case was straightforward on paper. Woman seeks closure from man who abandoned her and their 6-month-old daughter 30 years ago. No goodbye. No explanation. Just an empty closet and a note that said, "I can't do this." But Dr. Phil had learned over 20 seasons that what looks straightforward on paper was rarely straightforward in real life. The audience filed in. Cameras positioned. Lights adjusted. The stage was set for a confrontation that had been 3 decades in the making. Dr. Phil walked out to applause, but his demeanor was different today. No jokes. No warm-up banter. He went straight to it. "Today we have a story that I think is going to touch every single person in this room," he began. 30 years ago, a 27-year-old mother woke up to find her husband gone. Their daughter was 6 months old. He left a 3-sentence note and disappeared. For 30 years, she raised that daughter alone. For 30 years, she wondered why. The audience was already silent. They could feel something big was coming. Today, for the first time in 3 decades, Margaret Hayes is going to face the man who left her. Please welcome Margaret. She walked out slowly, each step measured. The photograph was still in her hand. She sat down in the chair across from Dr. Phil, but her eyes were fixed on the empty chair beside her. "Margaret, thank you for being here," Dr. Phil said gently. "I know this took courage. I don't know if it's courage or insanity, Dr. Phil," she said, and there was a hint of dark humor in her voice that made a few audience members smile sadly. "Tell me about that morning. The morning he left." Margaret took a breath that seemed to draw from somewhere deep inside her. "I woke up at 6:30 because Emma, that's our daughter, was crying. I reached over to nudge him awake so he could get her bottle while I used the bathroom. But he wasn't there." She paused. His side of the bed was cold. Like he'd been gone for hours. "What did you do?" "I got Emma's bottle. Changed her. Fed her. The whole time I thought maybe he went for an early run or to get coffee. But then I saw the closet. Half of it was empty. His dresser drawers empty. I started looking for a note, thinking maybe there was an emergency with his family, maybe someone was in the hospital. And then you found it. On the kitchen counter. 3 sentences. Her voice cracked but held. It said, "I can't do this. Don't try to find me. I'm sorry." The silence in the studio was profound. You could hear the hum of the cameras. "What did you feel in that moment?" Dr. Phil asked. "Nothing." Margaret's answer surprised the audience. "I felt absolutely nothing. Not anger, not sadness. Just nothing. I think my brain couldn't process it, so it shut down. I fed Emma. I changed her again. I did the laundry. And then around noon, I sat on the floor of the nursery and I screamed. Just screamed until my throat was raw and Emma was crying and the neighbor was pounding on the door asking if I was okay." Dr. Phil leaned forward. How did you survive? My mother moved in for 6 months. She helped with Emma while I worked 2 jobs. And I just kept going. What choice did I have? There was a baby who needed me. And in 30 years, did he ever reach out? Ever try to contact Emma? Not once. Margaret's jaw tightened. Not a birthday card. Not a phone call. Nothing. How did Emma handle growing up without a father? For the first time, tears appeared in Margaret's eyes. She handled it by pretending she didn't care. By saying it didn't matter. But I could see it. Every Father's Day at school when they made cards. Every dance recital when other girls had their dads in the audience. She'd say she was fine, but I'm her mother. I knew. Dr. Phil nodded slowly. Margaret, are you ready to see him? She gripped the photograph harder. I don't know if I'll ever be ready. But I need to do this. Then let's bring him out. Please welcome Robert Hayes. The man who walked onto the stage looked nothing like the man in the photograph. Where there had been dark hair, there was now gray. Where there had been youth, there was now age. But his eyes, those were the same eyes looking away from the camera 30 years ago. He sat in the chair next to Margaret but didn't look at her. Not yet. Robert, Dr. Phil began. Do you remember the morning you left? Every detail. His voice was quiet but steady. Why did you do it? Robert finally turned to look at Margaret. She was staring at him with an expression that was part anger, part disbelief, part something that looked like she was seeing a ghost. I was terrified, he said simply. Margaret's response was immediate and sharp. Everyone is terrified. That's what being a parent is. I know that now. I didn't know it then. You left a 6-month-old baby. Her voice was rising. You left me with bills I couldn't pay, a lease I couldn't afford, a life I wasn't ready to live alone. You ran away like a coward. Robert didn't defend himself. He just nodded. You're right. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Dr. Phil held up his hand. The temperature in the room had gone from tense to explosive in seconds. Margaret, I want you to tell him exactly what those 30 years were like. Don't hold back. She turned fully toward Robert, and when she spoke, her voice shook with 3 decades of suppressed rage. I worked 60-hour weeks so Emma could have clothes that fit and food that wasn't ramen noodles. I missed her first steps because I was at my second job. I cried myself to sleep every night for 2 years because I felt like a failure. I had panic attacks in the grocery store because I couldn't afford everything on my list. I went to parent-teacher conferences alone and made excuses for why her father wasn't there. I lied to my daughter about you for years because I didn't want her to know that her own father chose to abandon her. Robert's face had crumbled. Tears were streaming down his cheeks. And the worst part, Margaret continued, is that she blamed herself. She thought there was something wrong with her. That if she had been a better baby, maybe you would have stayed. Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. Something in Margaret's face had changed. The anger was still there, but underneath it, Dr. Phil saw something else. Something that made him stand up and walk closer to her. Margaret, hold on. Before we go any further, I need to ask you something. She looked up at him, confused. In 30 years, you never tried to find him. Why? Her answer came out as barely a whisper. Because I was afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid he'd have another family. Another wife. Other children. Children he chose to stay for. Her voice broke completely. I was afraid I'd find out that it wasn't about being scared of being a father. It was about being scared of being a father to my child. The audience collectively gasped. Dr. Phil turned to Robert. Is that true? Did you have another family? Robert looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. His silence was answer enough. Answer her, Dr. Phil said, and his tone had shifted. This wasn't the TV host anymore. This was the clinical psychologist who didn't tolerate evasion. Yes. Robert's voice was so quiet the microphone barely picked it up. Margaret made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and a sob. How many children? 3. Dr. Phil did something he'd never done in 20 seasons. He turned directly to the camera and said, "Stop the tape." The studio froze. Producers in the booth exchanged confused glances. The audience didn't know what to do. Dr. Phil walked over to his desk, pulled out a business card, and handed it to Margaret. "This is my personal therapist. I want you to call her today. Not tomorrow. Today." Then he turned to Robert, and his voice was ice. "You came on this show. Why?" Robert struggled to speak. "My oldest daughter, from my second marriage. She saw the episode preview online. She asked me who Margaret was. I couldn't lie to her anymore. So you came here to clear your conscience." "I came here to apologize." "Apologize?" Dr. Phil's voice rose. "You think an apology covers 30 years? Margaret stood up suddenly. Everyone tensed, thinking she might leave or lash out. Instead, she walked over to Robert and held out the photograph. "Do you remember this day?" Robert took the photo with shaking hands. "The day Emma was born." "Look at your face in that picture. You're looking away. Even then, you were already gone, weren't you?" He couldn't answer. He just stared at the photograph. "I don't need your apology," Margaret said, and her voice had changed. The anger was still there, but something else had joined it. Something that sounded like closure. "I don't need to understand why you left. I don't need to know about your other family. I just need you to know something." She took the photograph back. "Emma is a doctor now. She works in pediatrics. She's married to a wonderful man who's nothing like you. They have a baby girl, your granddaughter, though you'll never meet her. Emma survived despite you. I survived despite you. And we're both better off because you left." Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. He walked back to the cameras and made a cutting motion across his throat. "We're done. Clear the stage." The crew scrambled to comply. Robert sat frozen in his chair until a producer gently guided him off. Margaret remained standing, still holding the photograph. When the cameras stopped rolling and the audience was asked to stay seated for closing, Dr. Phil did something he'd never done before. He pulled over a chair and sat next to Margaret, not as a host, but as a human being. "How are you doing?" "I don't know," she admitted. "I thought I'd feel different. Lighter, maybe. But I just feel empty." Dr. Phil nodded. "That's normal. You've been carrying this weight for 3 decades. You don't just put it down and walk away unscathed. But you did the hardest part. You faced him. You said your truth. Now comes the healing. What do I tell Emma? Tell her the truth. Tell her that her father is a broken man who made a choice that had nothing to do with her worth and everything to do with his weakness. Tell her that she deserves better than someone who chose to leave. And tell her that she comes from a woman who is one of the strongest people I've ever met." Margaret finally smiled. It was small and sad, but it was genuine. Dr. Phil reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "Before the show, I had my team put together a list of resources. Therapists who specialize in abandonment trauma. Support groups. Strategies for talking to Emma about this. I want you to use them." She took the envelope, and this time when she held something in her hands, it wasn't a symbol of pain. It was a symbol of hope. "Thank you, Dr. Phil." But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. 3 months later, Dr. Phil received a letter. It was from Emma. She wrote, "Dear Dr. Phil, my mother told me about the show. At first, I was angry she went without telling me. But then she explained why. She said she needed to face him so I wouldn't have to. She said she needed to take that weight off my shoulders. I always knew my mother was strong, but I never understood how strong until now. Thank you for giving her that moment. Thank you for stopping the tape when she needed you to. And thank you for reminding her, and me, that we survived. Not because of him, but in spite of him. The letter sat on Dr. Phil's desk for weeks. He'd read it during breaks between tapings, before meetings with producers, late at night when he was reviewing cases for upcoming shows. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. Years later, when asked about the most impactful episodes of his career, Dr. Phil would always mention Margaret Hayes. "She taught me something I thought I already knew," he reflected in an interview. "That closure isn't about getting the answers you want. It's about accepting the questions you'll never have answered and choosing to move forward anyway." Margaret didn't get the apology she deserved. She didn't get the explanation that would make sense of 3 decades of pain. But she got something more important. She got her power back. The photograph Margaret brought to the studio, the one she'd clutched for 30 years, now sits in a frame in Emma's home office. But it's not displayed prominently. It's in a drawer, face down, under a stack of medical journals. Because sometimes the most powerful thing you can do with the past is acknowledge it existed and then choose to let it stay there. The envelope Dr. Phil gave Margaret that day is also in Emma's office. But that one sits on the desk where she can see it every day. Because some things are meant to be held on to. And some things are meant to be released. In the end, the lesson wasn't about confrontation or revenge or even forgiveness. It was about a woman who carried an impossible weight for 30 years and finally, with the help of someone willing to break the rules and stop the tape, found the strength to put it down. That's the power of facing what terrifies you. That's the legacy of Margaret Hayes. And that's why Dr. Phil still keeps that letter in his desk drawer, a reminder of why he does what he does.